I want to quickly talk to you about Form W-7. So here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So when we talk about Form W-7, here is what the form looks like. So we are speaking about the application for IRS individual taxpayer identification number. So your TIN, your TIN number, okay? And this is how the form looks like. So basically you have at the top right form to the right form, you have apply for a new ITN. So or if you want to renew an existing ITN, that's not a problem also. ITIN, not ITN, ITIN or ITIN. So for the purposes of this show, we are going to apply for a new ITIN. And so this is, so now here you have to specify the reason you're submitting Form W-7. And the IRS is pretty particular when it comes to the specific section that applies to your situation. So you have non-resident alien required to get an ITIN rather, to claim tax treaty benefits. And but here we chose non-resident alien filing a U.S. federal tax return. In other words, you are already in the country and you need to actually file a federal tax return, so you need an ITIN. And or if you are also a dependent of a U.S. citizen or resident alien, and then you need to actually you need to file Form 1040. So, and basically here, it says if D enter the relationship to the U.S. citizen or resident alien. So we chose I am the husband of a U.S. citizen, okay? And if D or E, you want to enter the name and social of the U.S. citizen, so we put Sweetie K, and we put the social here. Everything here is fictitious. This is a hypothetical example, by the way, okay? In case you haven't figured that out. So moving on to in the name category, you want to put first name, last name, 1A, and 1B, you want to put the first name, last name, and so on and so forth. You want to put the street address and the city, the town, the zip, everything, the states, and also if there is there's a discrepancy, it's a difference between the street address and a foreign non-U.S. address. You want to put it here, and you also want to put your birth information. So we put here that I was born in Guatemala, and I was born on January 3rd, 1910, and I'm a male. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. The next screenshot here I want to show you here, it says other information. So here the form is asking you countries of citizenship. So for this hypothetical example, I chose that I'm actually I'm a citizen of Guatemala, and the type of visa here, the type of U.S. visa, F1. Okay, and so 6D here, you want to put the passport in terms of identification documents, and so you want to put that this passport was issued by Guatemala authorities, and the number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And the expiration date, you put it there, and you also put the date of entry into the U.S. And make sure that you put the month, the day, and the year. I mean, here in the U.S. we have a different way of putting the date, so it's important because we've seen some viewers asking questions about the dates. So if you are outside the U.S., you put the day, the month, and the year. But here in the U.S. we do things a little differently. So just be aware of that. And 6E rather, you actually put it there if it's applicable to your situation. 6F and 6G. So 6G, you want to put the name of a college or university or a company for that matter that you are associated with, and the city and state where you are currently at, and the length of stay in the United States. Okay. And the signature portion is pretty straightforward. So you just have to put your phone number. You have to put if there is a delegate you want the IRS to reach out to in terms of this specific W-7, then you want to actually put the person here. And so it's one of those things where if you also have an acceptance agent, then you want the acceptance agent to actually put the right information also. One thing I want to say here is that any information that you provide to the IRS on this form is considered legal information. So make sure that you're as accurate and thorough as possible, because if you make mistakes, or intentional mistakes, if you will, there are some legal consequences, including fines, and your W-7 could be rejected also. So you do not want to be in that category, if you will. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form W-7. I want to talk to you about the pro tips that relate to this form here. So when we talk about Form W-7, it's all about applying for an ITIN, right? And you got to have an ITIN. If you are not a U.S. citizen, or you're not a U.S. green card holder, in other words, you don't have a social security number, that means you don't have an identifying number. So this is where you might need to apply for an ITIN. And so we are speaking about the ITIN. Serves as a unique identification number for tax purposes, allowing individuals to comply with their tax obligations and potentially claim certain tax benefits. So basically, when we talk about ITIN, we are speaking about something very straightforward. It's a 9-digit number. So you are able to use it to file a federal tax return. And in some cases, you might be able to open a bank account with them as well. In other words, if you don't qualify for a social security number for whatever reason, you can have an ITIN to go about your business. So you are able to comply with your tax responsibilities. And in some cases, this could also be used for business purposes, okay? And so one thing I want to say here is that basically the applying for an ITIN is a relatively straightforward process. So you just need to provide your personal information, including your name. You saw that a little earlier, right? Name, date of birth, and foreign status, along with supporting documents to establish your identity and foreign status. Additionally, the Form W-7 requires you to provide a valid reason for needing an ITIN and information about your U.S. tax reporting requirements. So, in other words, the IRS just wants to be clear about why you need an ITIN in the first place, okay? And so you have to be as thorough and complete as possible so the IRS can make a determination. This W-7 processes are pretty straightforward, but if you don't have the right information, the IRS might delay actually the issuance of your ITIN, and you do not want to have that, especially if you want to apply for a credit card, or you want to have a bank account, or you want to have other types of business processes happening in the United States. It's just a lot better for you to give the proper information so that your Form W-7 can be processed fast and your ITIN can be issued by the IRS a lot faster. Let's talk about ITIN's necessity here. So you need to understand that a social security number is often only available to those who are legally permitted to work in the United States. So this can apply to both citizens and non-citizens, such as permanent residents and citizens of other countries. And so these people identify themselves when submitting their taxes using their social security numbers. However, non-citizens without authorization to work in the country may also need to file tax returns if they get income from American sources or qualify for a refund of taxes withheld due to a tax treaty. And this is something, I mean, the United States has several tax treaties with several countries, okay? And so additionally, taxpayers must supply ID numbers for any non-citizen spouses or dependents they identify on the tax return. An individual taxpayer identification number, those numbers are relevant in circumstances like this. And so the ITIN gives the person a special identification number that the IRS can trace in its database, okay? And so when we talk about this form, the reason why the form is so granular is because when you have the right ITIN number, we can really do a lot of stuff in the U.S. So the only thing you can't do is actually work, among other things, okay? And so the Form W-7 asks for the following information, really. You have the name of the person, name, mailing address, and if different, overseas address of the applicant, the reason the applicant needs an ITIN, the date and place of birth of the applicants, the nation of citizenship of the applicants. You saw a little earlier when I told you that I was from Guatemala. So you can choose, you can actually select the right country where you're from, the applicant's foreign tax ID number, if you have one, and the applicant's U.S. visa number, if applicable. So if you're here in this country on a visa, you have to actually have the proper visa number. and also information on the documents submitted to prove your identity. So again, whether it is a passport or a driver's license or whatever you have. So it has to be valid though. It cannot be expired. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about the Form W-7. So let's talk about how to apply for an ITIN. So the thing is that I've shown you the form, right? The form is pretty straightforward, and it's one of those things where you can do it. You can do things yourself. And when we talk about the form, you have primary documentation, you have valid forms of ID, you have the process. There's a whole process around submitting the form. Right now, you cannot actually submit this form electronically. You cannot. You have to submit the form manually. So the primary documentation is pretty straightforward. You need a completed form W-7, the tax return that needs the number, and the person who needs the number. You must present valid identification. So when we talk about valid forms of ID, well, it really depends. So it can be your U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services photo ID card. So this is the foreign identification and status. The State Department that actually issues visas, foreign nationality and identity. U.S. or foreign driver's license, so this is identity only. U.S. military ID card, identity only. Military identification card issued by a foreign country. National ID card from a foreign country, so this will show the foreign status and identity. Non-driver ID card issued by the U.S. state, so this will show a foreign status and identity. Voter registration card for foreigners. Birth certificate from a foreign country. So here you are able to show identification. So if the certificate is from a foreign country, the status and identity from a foreign country. If you have a children under the age of 6, medical records, so this will show identification. If from a foreign nation, foreign status and identity. And school records for minors who are still enrolled. So we are speaking here about identification. If they are foreign citizens, then the status and identity abroad. And what happens here is that the IRS will look through the W-7, and if the application is accepted, the agency will assign an ITIN and handle your tax return. So in terms of submitting the tax form, it's pretty straightforward. Submitting the form, rather. And so the electronic submission of a tax return that includes one or more W-7 forms is not permitted. So you can submit it in person at any IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center, and that actually does in-person document reviews. There is at least one center in each state, and they are located in most major cities. And additionally, you can also send tax returns and W-7 forms by mail to IRS ITIN Operation, PO Box 149342, Austin, Texas 78714-9342. We're going to put the address on the screen so it's clear for everybody. And so an ITIN can actually be obtained in 6 to 8 weeks, according to the IRS. So if an ITIN hasn't been used on a federal tax return in the previous 3 years, it will expire at the conclusion of the current year. Let me talk about processing time and status updates. So as I said before, we are looking at 6 to 10 weeks, right? So now the processing time for an ITIN application can vary depending on several factors, including the time of the year and the complexity of the application. So, but generally, just think about 7 weeks for the IRS to process the application and notify the applicant of their ITIN assignment. So to check the status of your application, you can contact the IRS ITIN Operations Office or use the Where's My ITIN online tool on the IRS website. So it's just that you have to be prepared to provide your application information and any requested identification numbers. Okay, be very ready there. And in terms of due dates and deadlines for Form W-7, well, the thing is that there is no specific deadline for submitting Form W-7. However, you want to submit the form as soon as possible if you anticipate needing an ITIN to meet tax filing requirements. And so the IRS encourages individuals to apply for an ITIN well in advance of the tax return due date. And tax return deadlines really depends. So we are speaking about April 15th, so not a problem. And one thing I want to say here is that in terms of renewal applications, you don't have that. So unless you qualify for an exception, a U.S. federal tax return must be submitted with all Form W-7 renewal applications. And in terms of expanded discussions of allowable tax benefits, it really depends also. Unless they are claimed for an acceptable tax advantage, or let's say they file their own tax return, spouses and dependents are not eligible for an ITIN or to even renew an ITIN. And the subject of permissible tax benefits has been really will depend on your situation. And you also have child and dependent care credit. So if an alien dependent from Canada or Mexico is eligible for the child or dependent care credit requested on Form 2441, an ITIN may be assigned to that dependent, and the U.S. federal tax the U.S. federal tax return and the Form 2441 need to be joined to actually the Form W-7. This Form W-7, you need to understand that for the years 2018 all the way through 2025, the personal exemption deduction was actually suspended as a result of the TCJA of 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So therefore, unless they are claimed for, let's say, an acceptable tax advantage, or let's say, or they file their own federal return, spouses and dependents are not eligible for an ITIN or to renew an ITIN. So this is just part of what the TCJA actually implemented. So a U.S. federal tax return with the applicable schedule of form and a copy of the person's identification must be attached. Okay, and so when we talk about identity and foreign status, you can only verify that using a passport. You do not have to provide, let's say, a combination of at least 2 other current papers if you submit the passport that is currently valid. I want to insist on that. Your passport has to be valid. Okay, and it's one of those things where you want to make sure that you put yourself in the IRS shoes, and so you are providing as much information as possible so that they can process your information. And one thing I want to say here is that at the end of the day, you want to really take all steps possible for you to get your ITIN in due moment. It's one of those things where the earlier you start, the better. And before closing to this conversation, I just want to say that if you have any questions regarding all this information, please let us know in the comment section. And we cannot actually explore all other scenarios. So there are things that I didn't really talk about here. So you want to see what really works for you. And one thing I want to remember here. I want to remember here is that if you have any questions, please understand that you are having a conversation. You want to let us know the state and city you are actually commenting from, so we can certainly get back to you in terms of making sure you are having the proper information. Or you can just reach out to a tax expert. This could be a tax attorney, this could be a CPA, or an enrolled agent in your area. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's do a quick recap of today's conversation. So I spoke to you about Form W-7. So I gave you the overview, the pro tips, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.